So that is the good news. But certainly, this is one that the NYPD is thoroughly investigating. Casey.
Very scary. Bryn Gingras, thanks very much for that report. If you ever miss an episode of the show, you can listen to The Lead wherever you get your podcasts. Don't go anywhere. Our coverage continues now with Wolf Blitzer in the situation.
Hello everyone, I'm Bianca Noblo in London. Welcome to the Global Brief. The two candidates vying to become Britain's next Prime Minister face each other one-on-one for the first time in a heated television debate, and it was quite heated. On the agenda, the economy, immigration and China. And Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says his country is determined to resume grain export from its Black Sea ports despite a Russian missile strike. Then Pope Francis's pilgrimage of penance to Canada as the pontiff apologises for the church's role in the abuse of Canadian Indigenous people. Now, we've just heard big promises and fierce fighting from the two candidates for British Prime Minister. Former Treasury Secretary Rishi Sunak and current Foreign Secretary Liz Truss just faced off in their first one-on-one debate. They're hoping to convince Conservative members to elect one of them to replace Boris Johnson as leader of the party and leader of the nation. And so far, bookmakers say that Truss has the edge over former Chancellor Rishi Sunak. And the debate has been contentious, like their campaigns. Sunak attacking Truss's economic plan, saying it will raise inflation and cause mortgages to skyrocket. And Truss accusing Sunak of trying to get too close economically to China. Let's talk about it with John Rentoul, chief political commentator of The Independent. John, always great to talk to you. I'd love to know your first impressions from that debate, because honestly, going into it, I watch a lot of these things, too much probably. I thought Rishi Sunak would give the stronger performance because he's a very slick operator. Liz Truss can be quite gaffe-prone and robotic. My surprise takeaway from that was that Sunak seemed quite aggressive. He may have thought he seemed passionate. Yeah. And then Liz Truss seemed a lot more approachable and likeable.
Yes, I think that's right. I think Rishi Sunak knows that he had to make an impact in this debate, and therefore he was extremely aggressive. He was talking over Liz Truss, and I suspect a lot of people in the audience won't have liked that. He did appear to be domineering and quite sharp as well. I mean, she was sharp back, but much more hesitant in her speaking style.
And what do you think this spells for the rest of the campaign? Because people I've been speaking to, and MPs, even people who work on Liz Truss's campaign, have been saying that they thought she may be more likely to underperform in the campaign and in the debates, and it might be trickier for her. I'm not so sure about that now.
No, she performed well enough, but actually, when Rishi Sunak did allow her to speak, and he did actually let her speak for long sections, certainly in the second half, I felt she was a much weaker performer than he was. I think she didn't have very much to say. She tends to rely on sound bites and slogans, whereas Rishi talks extremely fast and wants everyone to know that he knows all the detail. He's across all the facts. And I think he comes across as a much more impressive potential Prime Minister. But I'm not sure that's what Conservative Party members will think, because he's telling them some pretty unpalatable truths.
Yeah, and I agree about the stock phrases coming from Liz Truss. I think if we hear spades in the ground one more time, us commentators our ears might bleed. Based on that performance and what we've seen of them in the campaign so far, which of the two do you think has the prospect of bringing the Conservative Party more electoral success in the medium term?
Well, that's a very difficult question. And actually, I thought that Rishi Sunak was a better opponent for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, because I thought he was pitching his tent very much on the centre ground of politics, whereas Liz Truss would, with her tax cutting agenda, give Labour too many hostages to fortune, because they would be able to present her as wanting to cut spending. But I'm not sure that that's how it's going to work out, because I think, the Conservative Party likes the idea of tax cuts, whether or not they're economically sensible. And I think the voters quite like the idea of tax cuts too.
And other than the economic argument, which is obviously the main point of contrast at the moment that they are certainly focusing on, what else is at stake here in terms of the differences between the two candidates and the direction that they might take the Conservative Party and country in if either one of them wins?
Well, I mean, Liz Truss is trying to make China a big issue. And I thought the BBC, rather surprisingly, helped her allocate quite a lot of time in the debate to the topic of China. But I'm not sure there's a real disagreement with them about that. I mean, Rishi Sunak said some sensible things about, wanting to defend our national security, but also wanting to engage with China. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. And I think that's Liz Truss trying to use her credentials as Foreign Secretary. I think the essential argument between them is the economic one. And Rishi Sunak tried very, very hard to drive home the point that Liz Truss's main advisor said that her policies would result in interest rates going up to 7%. I'm not sure if he did actually say that as a direct cause, but that is certainly Rishi Sunak's argument.
And as you pointed out, Rishi Sunak is considered by many, by the media, by the large majority of MPs, to be, on paper and in terms of performance, the more impressive candidate, the person who has a very clear attention to detail, which he demonstrates whenever he can. What do you think he would need to do in order to ingratiate himself and win over the base?
Well, that's the question, and I'm not sure that he's capable of doing that because, opinion polls of Conservative Party members and the YouGov poll has been pretty accurate in the past. Put Liz Truss so far ahead that it's difficult to see how Rishi Sunak can overcome that. He's obviously decided to go for the quite aggressive strategy of just saying, I'm better qualified for this. I know the arguments better, and I'm going to tell people that they can't just have tax cuts, unfunded tax cuts paid for by borrowing. It'll be interesting to see how that works. I mean, we just wait to see what the next poll of Tory party members says.
We shall wait with bated breath, John Rentoul. It's always great to chat to you. I wish we had more time, but we'll check in with you again as the campaign progresses. Both Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have paid tribute to David Trimble, who's died at the age of 77. Trimble was the first Minister of Northern Ireland who played a crucial role in the Good Friday Agreement, the peace deal that ended the troubles between Ireland and Northern Ireland. And the first shipments of Ukrainian grain could begin leaving Black Sea ports this week under a UN-brokered deal to ease a global food crisis. The UN says that both Ukraine and Russia have reaffirmed their commitment to the deal after Russian strikes on the key port of Odessa during the weekend threatened to jeopardize it. Ukraine says that grain exports should resume within days, even as President Volodymyr Zelensky warns the Odessa strikes prove that Russia cannot be trusted. Russia's foreign minister insists that his country has not violated the agreement.
If we talk about the episode that took place in Odessa, there is nothing in the obligations that Russia has taken on, including within the framework of the agreement signed on July 22nd in Istanbul, which would prohibit us from continuing the special military operation, destroying military infrastructure and other military targets.
Let's bring in CNN's Ivan Watson. He's live in Odessa tonight. Ivan, Turkey's presidential spokesperson, Turkey being one of the players in this deal, said that it may lay the foundations for trust that could lead to a resumption of ceasefire talks, prisoner exchange, and perhaps eventually to a peace agreement. But after Russian missiles struck where you are, the port of Odessa, one day after the agreement was signed, does anyone in Ukraine share that view?
No, I think that most Ukrainians think they're in for a long and bloody war, and it's already 5 months of this. That said, the Ukrainian president has said that he wants grain to be exported, that he does not want Ukraine to be standing in the way of this, and in the same breath is saying that Russia should unblock the Black Sea to allow this to happen. But from the point of view of the Turkish government, of the UN, you know, if you want to set a foundation for negotiations, you do have to build areas of trust. And it may be surprising that in this kind of very cruel and deadly conflict, there have been other areas where these two warring parties have come to agreements. They have conducted a number of prisoner exchanges. There were negotiations that led to the surrender of Ukrainian troops in the besieged port of Mariupol at that Azovstal steel factory. So I think that's part of what you're hearing from Turkish government officials, is that they're hoping that this could lead to something more. The proof will be in the pudding. You have to see whether or not ships can leave, whether or not the Russians will repeat attacks on the ports where the grain exports are supposed to be carried out from, whether or not the Ukrainians will agree with what the Russian foreign minister has insisted would be an escort of cargo ships by Russian warships. And if Russian warships got within range of Ukrainian shore-to-ship missiles, would they see a big, fat, juicy target that they could try to go after the way they sank the Moskva, the flagship of Russia's Black Sea Fleet some months ago? So there are a lot of questions here. And as we've heard from the U.S. government, they've pointed out that if this falls apart, there's still the plan B that the Ukrainians have been working on. It's not as efficient. It can't carry as much grain, but the Ukrainians are exporting grain right now overland, in trucks, in trains, and by the river Danube. But again, it can't carry as much grain, and that won't make the impact needed to lower global food prices. This war has put tens of millions of people on the brink of starvation due to the skyrocketing prices of wheat. That's what happens when you attack one of the world's biggest bread baskets.
Ivan Watson in Odessa, thank you so much. Now let's take a look at key climate stories making international headlines at the moment. Extreme heat is proving to be deadly and destructive across the Northern Hemisphere. In Europe, forest fire officials say there's a very extreme danger of wildfires in Spain, Portugal, Italy and Greece. That's the highest level of risk. Dozens of homes already have been destroyed in Lesbos, Greece, as firefighters battle a fast-moving wildfire there. Meantime, 60 million people in the US remain under heat alerts. In California, the fast-moving oak fire exploded in size during the weekend near Yosemite National Park. It's currently only 10% contained. California's fire battalion chief calls the wildfire's behavior unprecedented. Plus, take a look at this video from China. A bridge in Fujian province split in half while cement blocks expanded due to the heat. More than 70 Chinese cities and countries are under a red alert, the country's highest heat warning. And meteorologists say that it doesn't appear that relief will come anytime soon. And still to come tonight, a pilgrimage of penance. Pope Francis apologizes for the evil inflicted on Indigenous people in Canada by the Catholic Church. We'll take you live to Edmonton. Plus, the Odessa Opera and Ballet Theatre has reopened in the midst of war. We take you inside to show you how it's using beauty and grace to offer a reprieve to Ukraine's beleaguered people.
Over 250 million young people are not in education, employment or training. But how you start in life shouldn't determine what you do in the future. In the last 3 years, Future Makers by Standard Chartered has supported more than 650,000 talented young people from low-income communities, empowering them to learn, earn and grow. Because where others see problems, we see potential. We're Standard Chartered, and we're here for good.
It is actually very complicated to move money around the world. Few companies can do it at scale. Few companies can do it in the number of countries that we do it. And so these companies that come together like MoneyGrams and like our competitors do really provide a very unique service, and that is to instantly move money, get funds from the United States to Mexico, literally in sub-seconds. For the ability to take $350 that you worked hard to earn and get it back to your mother so that she can pick it up in Mexico, use it for food, healthcare, housing, is actually a very unique service. If you're from many of the countries, Mexico, Philippines, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, some of the largest receive markets in the world, it's absolutely critical to the lives of the consumers in those countries. But many people don't appreciate that. If it's not the life that you live, then it's not something that you really ever really get involved in.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
It's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
Pope Francis is expressing sorrow and shame during what he calls a trip of penance to Canada. He's apologising for the Catholic Church's role in the residential school system, in which thousands of Indigenous children forced to attend those institutions suffered abuse and oppression. One government report calls it cultural genocide. The Pope spoke of his pain while meeting with Indigenous groups near Edmonton.
I have come to your native lands to tell you in person of my sorrow, to implore God's forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation.
CNN's Paula Newton joins us now from Edmonton. Paula, how have Indigenous communities responded to this trip of penance, and where does this leave the future of the Catholic Church in Canada?
Yeah, and they are interesting questions, and we begin with that apology and how it was received. I mean, Bianca, so much pain in these communities, and of course, mixed feelings, ambivalence. And certainly as he was making that apology, there was a lot of emotion in the audience and a lot of emotion right across the country. But what we're going to show you now is the legacy of what still remains in terms of the hurtful, really torturous things that the Catholic Church did in this country. Take a listen.
It has taken the high-tech tools of this century for Canadian soil to give up the torturous secrets of the last. Drones hovering, swooping, mapping, ground-penetrating radar peering into every layer.
We see if there's any disturbances in that soil structure.
Disturbances. These are soil anomalies that could lead to the unmarked graves of Indigenous children, those who were once students at Fort Alexander Residential School in the Said King First Nation in the province of Manitoba.
When you have 190 anomalies, there's got to be something.
Go this way.
The Catholic institution is no longer standing, but its survivors want you to know what it stood for. Abuse of all kinds that a government report found amounted to cultural genocide.
That's where the priest stayed.
Rita Gumond was just 6 when she arrived. The abuse started soon after.
And he'd have us sit on his lap, and meanwhile he had his hands under our skirts.
Patrick Bruyere was 7. He endured 8 years.
Then he got me drunk. And I didn't know what the hell happened when I got up that next morning.
Sarah Mazzaroli was 6, forced to stay until she was 14.
Bam! Across the face. Every morning she did that to me.
Henry Boubard is 80 now. just 7 when the nightmare started.
But after what the priest did to me, sexually, I changed everything.
You have to survive if you're going to live. You have to find ways to get over everything that was being done to you.
Well, it was all prayer, it was all behave yourself, it was all don't speak your language, because if you do, you'll get punished, and a lot of humiliation.
These just told me to pray, but pray, what is prayer? It means nothing to me. If you don't pray, they'll go to hell. I thought I was all these years I was living in hell in that residential school. This is hell to me.
Hundreds of victims like these from one school. And there were dozens of these institutions across Canada, most run by the Catholic Church. More than 150,000 Indigenous children were forced to leave their families and were subjected to forced labor, neglect, and sexual and physical abuse. And thousands just went missing. In the past year, several Indigenous communities have discovered hundreds of unmarked graves, and more searches are underway. The survivors of Fort Alexander were too young to know where children went and why. There remain unmarked crosses in the cemetery made from the old school pipes. Who lays there? So here too, during the very week Pope Francis is on Canadian soil to apologize, they scour the land.
It is with these high-tech tools that Indigenous communities throughout Canada hope that they can get the spiritual homecoming that their lost children deserve, something that no papal apology can give them.
The Pope arrives with a singular purpose, he says, that of penance. But for decades there was impunity. Very few staff members were ever prosecuted. And that inflicts further trauma, some survivors say. And then there's the fact this in-person apology took years.
This thing had to be dragged out of this person. Somebody had to go to Rome to go in practically beg this guy to come here and apologize. Why couldn't he have done it on his own from here?
As extraordinary as the Pope's pilgrimage to Canada may be, it stands diminished by the scope of the abuse that is already known and the horrors still to be discovered.
Bianca, I have to point out here, and look, CNN has covered abuses by members of the Catholic Church throughout the entire world. This is different, and why? It was systemic. It was cultural destruction. Even the Pope himself in the apology said that it had catastrophic consequences for Indigenous peoples here. And in the words of the Indigenous people who reacted to this apology, don't ask us to get over it. This is the beginning of the healing, certainly not the end. Bianca?
Paula Newton in Canada, thank you so much. And we had a very misleading script in the show a little earlier referring to the Troubles, which were, of course, a sectarian conflict between Unionist and Republican communities, so we apologise for that. Now, you're taught to protect your king in chess, but who knew that you had to protect your fingers as well? One young chess player in Russia found out the hard way when a chess-playing robot broke his finger. You can see in this video how it triggered the robot to grab the boy's finger and squeeze. Apparently, the boy made a chess move too quickly. The incident happened during a match at the Russian Chess Open last week. The president of the Moscow Chess Federation, Sergei Lazarev, called it, of course, bad. Luckily, the boy didn't seem traumatized. Lazarev said that the child played the next day and finished the tournament with his finger in a cast. And back in Ukraine, the Odessa Opera and Ballet Theatre is open once again. It had to close for months because of the war. But now the dancers are back on stage and becoming a symbol of resistance. Once again, here's Ivan Watson.
There is great beauty in Ukraine amid the pain and suffering. In the southern port city of Odessa, dancers in rehearsal try to tune out Russia's deadly war.
This is more than just a beautiful expression of art and culture. Against the terrible backdrop of this war, these dancers offer a symbol of defiance, a sign that Ukrainians are not giving up.
The Odessa Opera and Ballet Theatre stands like a jewel, albeit one protected by sandbags. The Russian rockets and missiles periodically pound Odessa. Residents here cling to pre-war normality, and that includes the city's 135-year-old opera. Vyacheslav Chernuchovovich is the opera's director.
It's beautiful. Do you still need opera and ballet when there is a terrible war?
Yes, all people need this, and it's very important for society. Opera house is the symbol of good life. It's you hear this.
The Good Life, tonight's ballet performance. But amid preparations, there's an interruption. An air raid siren warns of a possible attack. I'm ushered downstairs.
This says shelter.
Musicians and dancers wait in the basement. The threat delays the start of the show. Two of tonight's solo ballerinas try to stay limber.
No, it's not normal.
Why are you sitting here?
Because war, yes, in our country.
Are you afraid?
Yes, of course we're afraid, says Katerina Kolchenko, though we're getting accustomed to these threats, and that in itself is horrible. After a long delay, the opera gets the all clear. Audience members emerge from their own shelter and take their seats.
In case of an air raid alert, all people must proceed to the shelter. Glory to Ukraine.
The music of Chopin fills the hall. And for the briefest of moments, the war seems very far away. The reality, though, is some of these performers sent their children away for safety to other countries. A number of the artists and crew are defending their country, serving in the Ukrainian armed forces, while those on stage struggle to keep the city's cultural spirit alive. Soloist Katerina Kolchenko crosses herself before entering stage right. But after just a few steps, the curtain suddenly closes.
Bad news. The third air raid siren of the night has just gone off. The curtain just came down, and the show has been brought to a stop.
Which людям по России. I want the whole world to start screaming, Kolchenko tells me, to stop this horror so that innocent people and children stop dying. I asked for help, the ballerina says, and for people not to remain silent. Ivan Watson, CNN, Odessa, Ukraine.
Thanks for watching. That was the Global Brief, and World Sport is up for you next.
We're here at the home of one of the FSB team. Was it your team that poisoned Navalny?
What do you want the world to know?
People are so exhausted. Just gonna help her carry this bag.
Scores of Taliban fighters, and just behind us, the U.S. Embassy.
I'm the one who has to look them in the eye. Can I have your word? These people are depending on you.
Now they're pressing in. They want desperately to tell their stories.
Tech for space.
There's a space environmentalist living inside of everybody.
Tech for clean air.
Because what we're talking about here is a global problem.
Tech for quiet.
We are using some AI technologies to mitigate intruding noise.
This is Tech for Good.
Join me as I meet the minds behind the technologies that could help in the battle against invisible pollution.
Tech for Good, Saturday on CNN, in association with Samsung.